Salvete discipuli, hodie spectamus lecturam primam capitis unius. Verbs, first and second conjugations, and adverbs. Hodie discemus primum vocabula capitis unius. Deinde discemus verba capitis. We'll learn about the person, number, and tense, and mood and voice of verbs. We'll also learn the conjugation of verbs. Finally, we'll learn adverbia, or adverbs. Primum discemus verba capitis unius. In hoc capite sunt quatuor decim verba. Unum, duo, tres, quatuor, quinque, sex, septem, octo, novem, decim, undecim, duodecim, tridecim, quatuordecim. Quatuordecim verba in hoc capite. Verba sunt amo, cogito, debeo, do, erro, laudo, moneo, salveo, servo, conservo, terreo, valeo, video, et voco. Primum verbum. Amo, amare, amavi, amatum. Helena Julianum amat, et Julianus Helenam amat. Quid significat amo? Ecce Julianus, ecce Helena. Helena Julianum amat, et Julianus Helenam amat. Proximum verbum. Cogito, cogitare, cogitavi, cogitatum. Ecce cogitator. Quid cogitat? Haec statua. Nihil statua est. Est statua nomine cogitator. Quid significat verbum cogito? Cogito ergo sum? Cogito ergo statua est? Cogitat ergo statua est? Proximum verbum. Do, dare, dedi, datum. Femina viro donum dat. Nam viri dies natalis est. Dan, 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 dan. Quid significat verbum do? Ecce femina, ecce vir, ecce donum. Femina viro donum dat. Quid significat verbum do? Proximum verbum. Debeo, debere, debui, debitum. Si tibi pecuniam do, tu mihi dare debes. Quid significat verbum debeo? Ecce pecunia, ecce ego, ecce tu. Si ego tibi pecuniam do, tu mihi dare debes. Proximum verbum. Erro, errare, erravi, erratum. Homerus errat. Dau! Nos omnes erramus. Errare humanum est. Quid significat erro? Proximum verbum. Laudo, laudare, laudavi, laudatum. Omnes Claudiam et Marcum laudant. Nos etiam eos laudare debemus. Quid significat verbum laudo? Oops. Ecce Claudia, ecce Marcum. Claudia et Marcum bonum opus faciunt. Omnes Claudiam et Marcum laudant. quid significat laudo. Proximum verbum. Moneo, monere, monui, monitum. Hoc signum nos monet. Quid est periculum? Quid significat moneo. Ecce signum. Hoc signum nos monet. Sed quid est periculum? Proximum verbum. Ecce salveo, salvere. Garfeldus, ecce garfeldus felis, dicit salvete discipuli, et vos dicitis salve garfelde. Salve garfelde. Salvete discipuli, dicit garfeldus. Quid significat salveo? Proximum verbum. Servo, servare, servavi, servatum. Servame, puer in aqua clamat, et vir in terra eum servat. Quid significat verbum servo? Ecce puer in aqua, ecce vir in terra. Vir in terra, puerum in aqua servat. Puer in aqua clamat servame. Quid significat verbum? Proximum verbum. Conservo, conservare, conservavi, conservatum. Naturam conservare debemus, Greta clamat. Quid significat conservo? Ecce Greta. Greta clamat. Naturam conservare debemus. Proximum verbum. Terreo, terrere, terui, territum. Scurae me terrent, puer clamat, matrem volo. Quid significat terreo? Ecce puer, ecce scura. Scura puerum terret. Scurae me terrent, puer clamat, matrem, mamma, matrem volo. Quid significat verbum? Proximum verbum. Valeo, valere, valui, valitorum. Vir feminae vale dicet. Vir feminam non iam amat. O miseram feminam. Quid significat valeo? Ecce vir, ecce femina. Vir dicit feminae vale. Vir feminam non iam amat. O miseram feminam. Quid significat verbum? Proximum verbum. Video, videre, vidi, visum. Oculus farum videt. Oculis nostris videmus. Quid significat video? Ecce oculus humanus. Ecce farus. Oculus humanus farum videt. Quid significat video? Proximum verbum. Voco, vocare, vocavi, vocatum. Est ultimum verbum. Puer cives vocat et lupus clamat, sed lupus non est. Quid significat voco? Ecce puer, ecce cives, ecce lupus. Puer cives vocat. Cives, cives, et lupus, lupus, clamat, sed lupus non est. Quid significat voco? Deinde discemus alias partes loquendi vocabularum capitis unius. Sunt duo pronomina me et quid, est unum nomen nihil, sunt due adverbia non et saepe, et est una conjunctio. Si. Pronomina vocabulorum capitis unius. Me. Serva me. Mater me amat. Me laudare non debetis. Quid significat me? Me est ego. In casu accusitivo. Proximum pronomen. Quid? 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 Est pronomen interrogativum. Quid vides? Quid facere debemus? Quid est amor? Quid est amor? Da-na-na-na-na, da-na-na-na-na. Quid? Quid significat quid? Deinde discemus nomina vocabulorum capitis unius, est unum nomen nihil. Quid vides? Nihil video. Nihil semper valet. Statua nihil cogitat. Nam statua est. Quid significat nihil? Deinde discemus adverbia vocabulorum capitis unius. Saepe. Musicam saepe audio. Romani saepe vincunt. De pecunia saepe cogitas. Quid significat saepe? Conjunctiones. Si. Si Romana es, amica es. Si peninsulam amoenam quaeris, circum spice. Quid significat si? Deinde discemus grammatica capitis unius. Okay, this is the part where I switch from Latin to English for the rest of the lecture. So now we've learned the vocabulary, and now we will have our grammar lesson. So today we are going to introduce the part of speech called verbs. And as a part of speech, verbs are words that describe the action of a sentence performed by a subject. The subject is the noun in the sentence that performs the action of the verb. So there's two types of verbs, okay? Those action words like see and hear and do and run and vomit and whatever, okay? So there's transitive verbs, okay? Verbs like video, to see. Those are verbs that take a direct object. In other words, they perform an action upon something. So a transitive verb means I'm doing something to something. I am driving a car. I am delivering a lecture right now. Okay, I am seeing my computer screen. Okay, I will go to this. I will. Sorry, that's a different verb. Then there's intransitive verbs. Those are the ones that do not act directly upon a direct object or upon a verb. So, for example, I go. I go to the store. I don't go the store, right? I go, the verb go does not act upon the store. I have to use a prepositional phrase to the store, okay? Or I grow, okay? I grow up into an adult, okay? I don't grow an adult, okay? Though you could use grow as a transitive verb, but in a different sense. I grow plants. So there's some verbs that can sort of act both ways, but don't worry about that right now. Okay, so in Latin, erro is a vocab word we learned here that is intransitive. So erro, to make a mistake, to make an error, right? You don't make a mistake. In Latin, you cannot. It does not. It's not. You can't erro a mistake. Anyway. Okay, a bit more about verbs. So the thing to know about verbs is in Latin, you'll notice that verbs have different endings depending on how they're used in the sentence. And those verbs vary depending on a number of factors. And a couple of those factors are, what is the person of the verb? Okay, that means who is the subject? Is the subject me? Is the subject you? Is it somebody else? Is it multiple people? And that's what number is. How many of the subject are there? Is there one subject, a singular subject, or is there multiple subjects performing the action? Are there students learning in the class, or is there just one student? Okay, that's number. Okay, it's usually singular or plural. So every verb has its own unique stem. It's the same way in English you can recognize a verb not by its endings, but by the first part of it, right? Like the verb to love. He loves, I love, etc. Okay, those are all a verb like cogito in Latin, for instance. You can always recognize the verb by its stem, cogita, and then it has a varying set of endings depend on its person and number and other factors. So cogitat means he, she, or it thinks, and so that's the stem cogita plus the ending t, and the t tells you information about who is performing the action. Another example is videmus, okay? That's we see. It's from video, which means to see. Okay, the stem is vide, okay, and the ending is mus. Mus tells us that it's we that are doing it, multiple people, and it's us. So let's look at the phenomenon of conjugation. In a lot of languages, most languages, especially Indo-European languages like English and Latin, verbs conjugate. Okay, it means that verbs change depending on who is performing the subject and how many of them. In other words, the person or number. So in English and in Latin, okay, you can conjugate a verb as follows. The verb to love. Okay, the first person singular is I love. So first person is me or we, whether depending on singular or plural. I love or we love. Okay. Those are first person subjects. Okay? Second person is someone you're talking to. Okay, whether it's you or you plural. Okay, you love, y'all love. Okay, of course you can say you love and mean plural, but I tend to use y'all when I'm teaching because it's for clarity, even though I'm not from the South. But it's a good habit. Finally, the third person is somebody else. Okay, whether it's one person or thing or multiple people. So he, she, it loves, right? And then plural, they love. And of course, we can also use the singular they in English, which is perfectly fine, they love. Okay. You see that in English, only in the third person singular do we really see verbs, at least in the present tense, have a different ending than in the other forms. So in English, this is sort of the only sort of form of conjugation we see for regular verbs. Okay. In Latin, that conjugation, those different endings are going to show up in every combination of person and number. So here is the equivalent verb conjugated in Latin in the present tense, meaning happening right now. So amo, amas, amat, amamus, amatis, amant. Notice that this is the verb to love. You can see the consistency of the same stem throughout these 6 forms. Okay, so we know it's from that verb. However, there are different endings depending on the person and number. So first person singular ends in O. Okay, second person singular ends in S. Third person singular ends in T. First person plural, mus. Second plural, tis. And third plural, nt. So I love, you love, he, she, it loves, we love, y'all love, and they love. Okay? So you can recognize who is performing the action and what the verb is by the ending that it uses. These are called personal endings, and they're going to be very consistent. Okay, you can swap out any verb stem, so you can use any verb and attach these endings, and it'll tell you who is performing the subject. And you'll notice that in Latin, you don't need a pronoun like in English. We don't have to say the equivalent of I or you or we in order to tell you the person and number. We just can rely on the endings. Okay? You can put a pronoun like ego or tu, but that's more for emphasis, right? You love. Ego amo. I love. Okay? Tu amus. amas. You love. Okay, that's putting an emphasis on the pronoun rather than the verb. Okay, but don't worry about that right now. Okay, there's a bit more lingo. This is very fundamental to learn about verbs before we continue. So we saw that verb endings change according to person and number, but there are other factors at play that modify verbs. There's also, you have to take into account tense, voice, and mood. Okay, so besides person and number, you have tense, voice, and mood. So what is the tense? Well, tense comes from the word tempus, which means time. And it basically means the point in time of the action. When is the verb being performed? Was it performed in the past? Is it being performed right now? Will it be performed in the future? So for instance, in English, the present tense, I love, I am loving right now. Okay, I currently love. Future, I will love, I shall love, I am going to love. Okay, it'll happen subsequently. Or the perfect tense, I loved, I have loved. Okay, otherwise known as a past tense, right, etc. There's other tenses. Okay, voice, this will come later, but mostly we'll be dealing with the active voice for a long time. But basically, voice means whether the subject is doing the action on something else or is having the action acted upon it. So we'll largely be working in the active voice for a long time. I love, I am performing the action of loving upon something else. But eventually we'll learn the passive voice, which is I am loved. Okay, I am being loved. I am receiving the act of loving from something else or somebody else. Okay, and finally, mood. Okay, there are two moods that we'll be working in this semester. Okay, and this is the manner of the verb's actions. So an indicative statement, indicative mood, is what we'll be working with a lot. And those are statements of fact. It indicates something. Okay, I love. Okay, I'm stating a fact that I'm loving, or at least an alleged fact, right? We'll also be dealing in this chapter as well with the imperative mood, the mood of commanding. Okay, love, go to the store, do your homework. Verbs of direct command, making somebody do something. Okay. So, this little diagram here of a verb conjugation is going to be a very standard exercise that we'll do. Conjugating verbs means to put a verb into 6 forms like this of all the combinations of person and number, but also changing it depending on their tense, voice, and mood. So this is not just the verb amo, I love, in its full conjugation of person and number, but this is also it in the present tense, meaning it's happening right now, in the active voice, meaning it's performing the action, and in the indicative mood. These are statements of fact. Okay? If I changed the tense, voice, or mood, then we would have some different forms here based on the principal parts of the verb, which we'll get to in a moment. Okay? So, in order to conjugate verbs, to put it into those 6 forms, depending on person, number, tense, voice, and mood, you need to get very familiar with what are called the principal parts of the verb. Okay, you noticed in the vocabulary lesson that I didn't just give you amo. I gave you, for the most part, 4 different forms that all have similarities to them, but a different set of endings. These are the principal parts of the verb. Okay, and these are different kind of forms of the verb that we use in order to form the verb into various tenses and voices and moods, etc. Okay, and so for a while, we're only going to be working with the first 2 principal parts, but eventually we will be working with the second 2 principal parts, especially by the end of the semester. So it's incredibly important that you learn all 4 principal parts of each verb that you memorize for vocab, because even if we're not going to use the 3rd or 4th principal part right away, when we do have to use it, you'll already know it. And so it'll be very helpful that you've already know it to be used later. So whenever you memorize a verb, you have to memorize all of its principal parts. Okay, and of course you'll notice that there are patterns here, right? Each set of principal parts of any verb has similarities to the principal parts of other verbs, as you see here, and we can categorize different Latin verbs into what we call conjugations or conjugation categories. In other words, verbs whose principal parts follow a similar pattern. Okay, so in this chapter, we're learning the first two conjugations. There's 4 conjugations total. Okay, we'll get to the third and fourth later. But first and second conjugation, regular verbs. Okay, in other words, verbs that follow a consistent pattern look like as follows. So the first conjugation is the A conjugation. You see the letter A repeated a lot, okay? Whenever you notice patterns, pick up on those. So you notice that we have amo, amare, amawi, amatum. So this is all the word to love, okay? But there are different endings, okay? And you notice that the letter A repeats a lot. Well, here's servo, the word to save, okay? It has the same endings in its principal parts, but it's a different stem because it's a different verb, save versus love. Okay, so pick up on that pattern. But notice that not all Latin verbs have that o, are, awi, atum ending in its principal part. Some of them have eo, ere, o, ui, itum. Okay, that's a different set of principal parts. But notice that we learn multiple verbs that also have this kind of letter E, or this long letter E, showing up a lot. That's characteristic of the second conjugation. So moneo, meaning to warn or advise, and terio, meaning to terrify, to scare, right? Notice they have very similar... Oh, sorry, that's... sometimes I notice errors that I myself make in these lectures because I am also human. Errare humanum est, to err is human. That was in the vocab. Okay? So the second conjugation, you notice they both, the first principal part ends in EO, okay, second principal part long, ERE, UI in the third, etum in the fourth. So again, that's how you spot a second conjugation verb. We will practice this a lot. Okay, so here's something we saw before, and here's something new. Okay, this is the full conjugation in the present active indicative. So the present tense, okay, happening right now, the active voice, it's performing the action, and indicative, it's stating fact for the verb to love and the verb to see. Okay, and notice that when you conjugate the first and second conjugation verbs in the present, you have the stem, and then you have what I like to call a stem vowel that goes in between the stem and the personal ending. It acts sort of like a glue, right? So in the present, that stem vowel is an A, okay, that connects the stem, to the personal ending. And in the second conjugation, that stem vowel or that connecting vowel is an E, okay? So video, I see, vides, you see, videt, he, she, it sees, videmus, we see, videtis, they see, vident. Videtis, y'all see, vident, they see. Okay, so you notice the same personal endings are used in both verb conjugations, but we have different stem vowels and, of course, different stems because they're different verbs. Okay, so pick up on these patterns. Notice what is consistent. Okay, the personal endings are consistent even if you're using a different conjugation of verb. All right. So here's a bit of a review before we get on to the imperative mood. So again, the person of a verb, who does the thing? Do I do it? Do they do it? Number, how many do the thing? Okay, is it multiple people doing it, plural? Is it just one person, singular? Tense, when do they do the thing? Are they doing it now? Are they doing it in the past? Are they doing it in the future? Voice, do they do the thing, or is the thing being done to them? Okay, for now we'll work in the active voice where they're doing the thing. And then the mood, right? Do they, would they, or must they do the thing? So the indicative is they do the thing, okay? Statement of fact. Would they, that's subjunctive. That's unreal conditions. That's next semester. And finally, must they do the thing, right? Imperative. Do the thing. Do your homework, okay? So the imperative mood is a bit simpler than dealing with the indicative mood because you only really have to work in the second conjugation. Because if you're telling somebody to do something with a correct command, you're always working in the second person, okay? The person of you are talking to. And so it's just a difference to, am I talking and giving a command to one person or to multiple people? Okay, so the imperative mood is the mood of direct commands. Do your homework, go to work, okay, etc. So again, indicative verbs, okay, are statements of fact. Verbs in the imperative are direct commands, so you're only talking to somebody using the second person. So with the first and second conjugation, you only have to know two forms of the imperative for each. So cogita, think. You're telling somebody to think. Okay, you're telling a single person, second singular, to think. Think, cogita. If you're telling multiple people to think, like I am right now, you say cogitate. Okay, so you're giving them the same command, except you're acknowledging that there are more than one of them rather than one, and so you change the verb ending. Okay, cogita, you singular, think. Cogitate, you plural, think. Okay. Also, second conjugation verbs. Okay, notice how they are similar but also different when you use the imperative. Salve, okay, greetings. Salvete, greetings. Okay, I'm saying the same verb, but here to one person and here to multiple people. So you notice that Garfield said to all of you, Salvete discipuli, hello students, greetings students. But we responded to Garfield saying Salve Garfielde, okay, because we're just talking to one person. Okay. All right, last thing, I appreciate your patience, but there's a lot to get through in the first lecture because we're laying a lot of solid foundations. Okay, so feel free to pace yourself here, pause the video, come back to it. You can do that with any lecture. Okay, the last concept that we will introduce is adverbs. And adverbs are the love child of verbs and adjectives. Verbs describe actions, or verbs connote actions, and adjectives describe nouns. Well, adverbs describe verbs. Okay, so in other words, you want to modify, you want to characterize, you want to say something about the action of the verb. Okay, in English, a lot of adverbs end in ly, quickly, perfectly. There are some irregular adverbs like well. You do the job well, you do the job quickly, you do the thing perfectly. Okay, so those are all verbs that describe the action of doing, right? Do it quickly, do it perfectly. Okay, so here's a couple common adverbs in Latin. Puella puerum non amat. The girl does not love the boy. Okay, so not, non, okay, is a adverb that describes the loving. It negates it, but it's still describing it. So non, not, is an adverb. Romani saepe vincunt. The Romans often win. The Romans are often victorious. Okay, so saepe means often, and saepe is an adverb describing the action of winning or being victorious, right? They often win. Okay, so again, adverbs describe verbs. Okay, they tell you something more about the verb. Okay, that's it. So now I ask you to respond to the lecture, reflect on the lecture, react to the lecture, and write a 50-word lecture response telling me about what you understood, what you still need, we had some trouble with, what you were curious about. Talk about the vocab words that you got, what you didn't get, other things you found relatable. Okay, I look forward to seeing that feedback. All right, so go into D2L and find the lecture response assignments. Okay, valete discipuli.